everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
With the retailers that we're focused on, they want to do the right thing and they want to save money. And so that makes it an easy sell for them. But we really do see the tables turning in terms of, in Europe, there's the EPR bills. And it's possible that even as early as this year, we're going to see SEC regulations here in the US that kind of do shine a light on this, what the New York Times and what BBC Earth and what other folks have called the dark side of retail. And a lot of people don't know that this is what's happening with products. And as soon as they do find out, they're disgusted or ashamed or alarmed, and it's not going to be able to go on forever. And so we feel that we'll soon have the tailwinds from that as well.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Petit, founder and CEO of Liquid Donate. Welcome to the show today.
Thanks so much, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here.
Your background is in sustainable social impact. Tell us how that intersects with private business models with social and civic causes.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the founder and CEO here at Liquid Donate, like you said. But prior to this, I was actually the 15th employee at Postmates. So I joined the company back in 2013 and started out running our customer service team, our sales team, our business development team, and then ultimately was asked to start our social impact program. And with our social impact program, we were able to build 2 food security products that really interacted well with the product that we were serving the general population with. One was called Food Fight, where we were able to put a button on the merchant tablet that enabled all the restaurants we worked with to just press a button and have us come pick up their excess food and take it to local shelters and low-income housing units at the end of the evening. And then we also built a product called Bento. And Bento enabled folks who didn't have access to a smartphone to text the word hungry to a specific number and receive a free meal from the nearest Postmates pickup restaurant. And for that, we won the Time Magazine Invention of the Year award. And so based on the success of those 2 products and being able to really bridge the world between the nonprofit space and people who needed things with technology, we really knew that was how we were going to transform some of the world's even bigger challenges outside of food security. So that's how we got started in building Liquid Donate.
Well, terrific background. Again, it's makes perfect sense in terms of what you're doing today. But I do want to spend just a minute or so, is that the grocers and the restaurants and fast food chains, they on a nightly basis dump perfectly good food into their trash bins.
They do.
And over the years, we've come across many startups and NGOs that have tried to do exactly what some of the entities that you created and projects you've created in the past have tried to do. But yet in 2023, the majority of these chains and franchises continue to dump their leftover food. Why is that? And is it ultimately the fear of being sued not worth going through the hassle of coordinating donations?
Well, I think that there's 2 things that happen. So when we were at Postmates, the Food Fight program was free. And so I think there's a big cost barrier to actually matching and moving these donations to the folks who need them. So with restaurants having such tight margins already, unless the food recovery program is being provided and subsidized by somebody else, it's not a cost-effective thing for them to do on their own. You also have to consider the state of the employee. Once you've worked a full 8, 10, 12-hour shift at a restaurant, the idea of driving to a nonprofit that might be closed or might not be accepting the food, and now you have this food in your car, there's a lot of additional complications that need to be solved through technology matching on the back end. So with Food Fight, we were able to successfully do that. And then the other issue is definitely some people aren't aware of the liability standards that exist here in the United States, where there's the Bill Emerson Act actually protects folks who donate food in good faith from any kind of liability. And I know everyone has a friend or an uncle or somebody in their life who's been sued because of food donation, but there's actually been 0 cases in the history of the United States since the last time I checked in a food donation situation because of this federal protection. And it's just not something that happens very commonly. So there is a bit of a misunderstanding on the education front, but also a time and money constraint. And so we knew we were doing that with Postmates and making it easy and free for the restaurants to access the service. But with Liquid Donate now, we knew we could go even more than just the food waste process and also be completely category agnostic. So we move everything and match everything now, not just food, but also home goods, furniture, electronics, clothing, apparel. It doesn't matter. We can find a home for it.
Mm-hmm. So let's transition to talk about Liquid Donate. And many of us as consumers, we work with or utilize Amazon and many other online retailers. Mm-hmm. And if we're really honest, we also return a lot of things, whether it's clothes, electronics, appliances, really just about anything.
Yeah.
And when these things get returned, many times they're oftentimes brand new. Maybe the box is open, maybe it's slightly used for maybe once or so. But it's such a pain in the rear for these retailers to process. So they choose, because they don't have the capacity or the capability, they just don't want to go through the sorting and the reclassification and putting it out there again. So they end up selling in bulk to these larger buyers who essentially buy it in terms of weight or cargo containers. So doesn't that already work? Or what's still missing in the ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's also a good understanding of the landscape. I think what most people don't know is that 80% of returns end up in the landfill. And that's according to the National Retail Federation, the NRF. And so 80% are ending up in the landfill, which means 20% are ending up in those storage containers or liquidation channels where they're able to recoup some of the cost. But the problem for retailers is that the expense of the return often outweighs the value that product could have if it were to be resold. And so sending it to the landfill or sending it to incineration is actually cheaper for them. And so what we did at Liquid Donate is that we stopped the process at the very first step of where that return happens. When the retailer knows that item isn't going to actually be able to be resold and recoup any of its value, we automatically route it directly to the nearest nonprofit. So now that return is only traveling 10 miles versus 1,000 miles, ultimately to end up in the landfill. We're actually matching it directly with a nonprofit, producing a shipping label for that nonprofit, because we definitely don't expect consumer behavior to change.
So, I mean, it sounds like a beautiful business model, but tell us about when you first launched it. What was the reception from the marketplace?
Yeah, so I started the company in November of 2021 after Uber acquired Postmates. I was on the transition team for a few months, but it just wasn't the best fit for me. So decided to leave and start Liquid Donate. And the original idea was all around technology. It was on these tech companies have so much excess inventory and excess product sitting in closets and warehouses and on random desks. You build an Android app, you go buy an Android phone so that you can test it. You go buy the 3 different sizes of the iPad. You test all of these products, right? And then use them once or twice. And then they go into hiding. And we saw this over and over again at a number of tech companies that we were working with for a variety of different reasons. And so the original idea was to match all that technology with nonprofits that needed it. And so the original MVP of the product was me just collecting electronics from around my house, from my friends who had products that they just didn't really want anymore and weren't sure what to do with, and listing them on a Wix website that I made overnight. Within a week, nonprofits had ordered all of it. And so then I was like, okay, wow, we are out of technology. I have these other things I want to donate. I wonder if the marketplace would work for that. So we started posting apparel and stuffed animals and holiday gifts that we'd never opened, just things that we acquire over time in our lives. And then in the next 7 days, those went. And so we knew we had a really smart idea that there was excess inventory. It needed to be matched. And how could we do that on a bigger scale? And because I was familiar with sustainability and with social impact and some of the problems that are impacting our world today, I knew that this return issue was a really, really big issue. And so diving into the retail space was really where we found our ground.
So again, I don't think the demand function is ever really in question when you're giving things on a donation basis. There's plenty of NGOs, nonprofits that are more than glad to take it. The issue is signing up these retailers and tech companies and just corporations in general. What has been some of the hurdles or objections that you faced over the years?
Yeah, so I think the main objection that we receive on a regular basis is the lack of belief that it's really possible that we're able to save them money by donating the product versus sending it through their traditional reverse logistics channel. And because we're such a new company with a new technology, I think it is difficult to make the case for that. Luckily, we've had some companies like Room and Board, for example, take us under their wing, let us prove to them that we are able to move all of their returns and excess inventory into the homes that need them and help them toward their sustainability goals. And we've been able to prove that to be the national donation partner for them. And so as we continue to grow our clientele, I think we'll have more and more case studies that are able to really showcase that our system works. It is innovative and it is more affordable than the alternative. Not to mention it's better for the environment. So I think it's really just objection and over the time that we've been in business and how do we really prove that we're making it a more cost-effective solution than what they're doing today.
So aside from the newness factor and just the fact that you guys haven't really built up that longer track record over, let's say, a decade or two, in terms of just basic economics, tell us about how they perceive the donations that can potentially have tax write-offs for them versus selling or essentially, throwing these away into landfill or recycling.
Of course. So with the reverse logistics process, when a customer goes to an e-commerce site to do a return, to process a return, what happens is that the system that they're using, whether it's the actual retailer themselves or potentially a third-party company that has been contracted out to handle their returns, the retailer has set a set of rules around what should happen to these products. And right now, all of the rules are either tell the customer to keep the product or tell the customer to send it back to a distribution center because we might want to resell it. And that ends up taking the product and either leaving it with a customer who doesn't want the product, who might landfill it anyway, or it starts this chain of terrible events where it goes back, it ships usually to another state, and then is processed at a distribution center where the retailer now pays a handling fee per item for someone to touch and handle and review that product. Then there's a storage fee for it to sit there. And then there is a fee for it to be taken to a landfill. And then there's a landfilling fee. And so the cheapest that we've ever had a retailer quote us that taking back an item cost for them is $11. And that is the cheapest price that we've ever had confirmed by an actual retailer. So on top of the refund, they're paying $11 additionally just to send that product to the landfill. And with us, we're able to actually stop the return at the customer's home. When the retailer knows that that's not a product that they would likely want to resell, we automatically pull from our matching algorithm, from our database to find the best fitting nonprofit. We surface a shipping label directly to that nonprofit. And so now that product is traveling from the customer's home to the nonprofit, usually within 10 to 20 miles of the customer's home, which also reduces emissions. It saves them money on the shipping cost, and it completely eliminates that handling fee, that storage fee, the landfill transit fee, and then ultimately the landfilling fee. And then on top of that, we're also able to give them the tax receipt. And so based on whatever their accounting structure is, they're potentially able to write that product off.
It's compelling. I mean, it's you're basically removing the biggest headache that they have on the back end, the reverse fulfillment aspects.
Yeah.
So So again, it's compelling, but why aren't the likes of Walmart, Target, and Amazon signing up?
That's a great question. Why are they not signing up? I would like them to tell me. I know that's not the best answer in the world, but I mean our solution it works. It's elegant. It's an API integration that can go into their inventory management system or their POS. So I think it's just these large companies, they just have an aversion to change. I think this is a completely new process. They want to take time to evaluate it. They want to work it through their bureaucracy. They want to run pilots. And so we're having conversations with them at this stage. But I think there's still so much other volume that can be captured by e-commerce sellers, especially as e-com and e-com returns continue to grow, that even these like smaller and medium-sized businesses, they also have this problem. And so we're solving it for everyone from the small, mom and pop business that is running an e-com site with just themselves and a friend, all the way up to, an Amazon or a Walmart, and everything in between. So we try to be pretty, we're pretty category agnostic, but we're also agnostic to the size of the business because we're a pure software solution. We can just run it all through the system.
So I want to briefly talk about the matching algorithm. So there are many, many sites from the likes of Craigslist to FreeCycle and Facebook pages and so forth that allows for people to give away things for free, but yet some of those things are never really quite wanted. So let's say some outdated Halloween costume or some obscure pencil or some object. How do you ensure there's actual match? And what if there's no place for that product to actually get shipped out to?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the first thing that happens with our matching algorithm is that any 501c3 is able to sign up, register on our site, and let us know the types of items that they'd like to be notified about. And so we are trying to increase the amount of choice that these nonprofits have so that they're not receiving a pencil or an outdated Halloween costume that they don't want, that they have no use for with themselves or with their clients. So that is definitely a part of it. And so our goal is that long term, we plan to match 95% of the products that get donated for the same or similar use that they were originally intended for. And then we do estimate that about 5% of the products will be unusable for a variety of different reasons. And so our matching algorithm actually includes circular economy partners that we're working with that will take that product and upcycle it or recycle it into the best next use case for that product. So, for example, let's say someone wanted to donate some pillows that were used from a dog shelter. Great intention, probably not going to be the best use case for a donation. And so what we would be able to do is to work with one of our partners that is able to take that product, deconstruct it, and then turn it into insulation for low-income housing units. And so that product is still able to be used and repurposed in the appropriate way, and we're not sending it to the landfill, but we're still finding a home for it that is better than the landfill.
Now, I haven't asked a question in terms of how you as an organization actually generate revenue and be self-sustaining. And investors are going to be asking, yes, you could donate, but can't you also create a business facet of your entity that's for profit that can also take some of these goods and resell it and create a new revenue line?
I think that's definitely possible. It's something that we have discussed, but right now, the biggest need is the speed at which these products need to be matched and moved to their new home because storage costs are rising, shipping costs are rising, and retailers are just being squeezed out by the margins on these products. And when 80% are already going to landfill, we know that's a huge part of the market that we can address that isn't being addressed today. There's a number of re-commerce sites, resale sites, sites that you can buy and sell in bulk. And we're the solution for once that hasn't worked. And we've seen it time and time again where someone will list products on one of those sites to sell them in bulk at a discount, a deep, deep discount, and they're still not moving. And then what do? They landfill it. And so we're the alternative to that as well.
So to that point, are you also working with those purchasers of bulk goods on a heavy discount that can't move their goods and can't find buyers on these different sites. Are you potentially taking some of those things off their shelves?
We are, yeah. So we have a few different partnerships with some of the major distribution centers and warehouses where we're recommended to their client if there's product that just isn't moving, product that's costing them more to store than the value of the product anymore. And so we definitely are an alternative for keeping these products around when there's nobody who wants them and letting them get older and older, making them less and less useful over time.
Now, something that may actually anger our listeners is that many of the luxury brands, and I'm talking about clothing brands and shoes for that matter, and handbags.
Fashion, yeah.
Both high fashion, but also fast fashion, is some of them, not only do they want to control their total inventory to make sure they're getting the highest profit margin, but for those that have access, rather than doing something good with it, they rather burn it. And of course, we've heard many stories about that. What's being done there? And are you also working with luxury brands as well as fashion and fast fashion?
We are. We're working with luxury brands, and then we're working directly with them to find a partnership that makes sense for them. So we're not here to blame or shame anyone for whatever their actions are today. I think a lot of us are consumers. A lot of us buy products online. We have them shipped, not knowing how far they came, and then we send them back as a return, ultimately, most likely ending up in the landfill. So none of us are really outside of this circle for the most part. And so with these high fashion brands that would prefer for their product not to be donated directly, we are building new features for them that make sense. And so, for example, we're right now working on finishing up a new feature that will allow a retailer to have more control over where their product gets donated. And so for these high fashion brands, they're like, okay, well, we're comfortable with that going to a person who is making a donation at a gala. So this can be a silent auction item. And so we're actually building out different categories where the retailer will be able to tell us, hey, you could donate this, and I want it to be used as a silent auction item. It'll drive a higher value. It'll stay aligned with our brand, and we'll get to say, hey, we donated, $40 million worth of these luxury handbags. And they went to the type of population that is typically carrying our handbags. And, take with that what you will, but working with folks and trying to figure out what works best for them is really the strategy that we're taking, because we're doing the same on the consumer side. We don't really expect retail behavior to change unless there's a better, cheaper, and a better alternative that makes more sense for them.
So I want to talk about policy, because I'm sure you've also looked and studied some of this as well, is that sometimes we have good intentions and want to do good, but yet the way it gets implemented, sometimes there are unforeseen consequences and even externalities. So if consumers catch on that, hey, the things that I return are going to get donated and they're going to go to good places, maybe I'm more willing to return things more often, more readily. And does that actually increase the problem and the size of the issue?
I think if that is what comes to fruition, I will be very surprised, because honestly, what happens, even when we're showing a shipping label to a nonprofit versus to a distribution center, the amount of folks that actually know that that product is going to a nonprofit versus back to a distribution center is extremely low. Most people aren't even noticing where the package is being sent to. And so I think that there is a possibility that once Liquid Donate gets as big as Amazon, as big as Uber, and we become more of a household name, there will be some additional parameters that we'll need to set in place, but we're not quite there yet.
Okay. I'm not sure if you've already answered the question around how you guys sustain yourselves. So can you talk about your business model?
Absolutely. So we're a marketplace, and the retailers are the ones who pay us. So it's simply cheaper to pay us on a per item donation basis per match than it is for them to send the product to landfill. So it also helps with their ESG reporting. We talk about SASB and GRI and how these different disclosures map to different specific entities in those reporting structures. We help with the sustainability reporting. We provide data and metrics, of course, but ultimately, the retailers are paying us to move their product, whether it's an individual item, a box, a pallet, or a truckload. We can handle any of that, whether it's from the customer's home or from a warehouse, a store, or distribution center. And we can get that all matched, moved, and then invoiced to them on a monthly basis.
So I'm going to say something that, again, may potentially anger our audience, is that being a VC myself, I know some of the common practices in Silicon Valley as an example. And we've been seeing lots of articles about how some of those practices are effectively illegal. So in this case, would it make sense, again, I'm not necessarily advocating for it, but obtain VC money so that the retailers don't actually have to pay you guys, and for you to allow to then grow and scale to a certain point where you can start to figure out how to monetize, but allow the VC money to basically subsidize your growth and scale?
I'm sure that some folks will take advantage of that model, but that's not something that we're particularly interested in. We already have paying retailers, and we know that we can monetize it from getting retailers to pay us. So we are taking the approach from the sustainability side on a personal front from our team. We care a lot about climate tech and how are we going to help keep all of these products out of landfill. We really focus on our pounds diverted from landfill and the number of products donated. That's really what our team cares about internally. We just happen to have also built this really awesome technology on top of that that helps to solve this problem for retailers. So we make it cheaper for them, which is how we make the business case, but we also really care about the sustainability side. So being able to be more self-sufficient, be able to prove out our pricing model, be able to prove that the nonprofits will want this product and continue to grow that network is our strategy. We have VC backing, but that doesn't preclude us from having a successful business that exists outside of the VC funding.
So I'm going to go back to the psychology of retailers, the fact that, again, many of them before the whole online transition thought everything in terms of square footage, meaning that per square foot, how much sales am I getting? And they were very dated. And part of the reason I think many of the brick and mortar companies have gone by the side or have really had to restructure is because they couldn't get out of their own way of thinking, their traditional way of set of metrics. To that point, their mindset is all around squeezing out small profit margins. It's already tight as it is. They have large infrastructure costs, large CapEx and OpEx. So even though mathematically it makes sense to reduce the cost of return, the reverse procurement or fulfillment, the storage, the handling, the sending out to the landfill, yet the thought of having to pay somebody like you guys, they don't like that. So again, how do we get over some of those kind of psychological barriers and traditional frameworks that they're still operating under?
So luckily, I feel and have seen that sustainability is becoming more core to retailers' business models. And not only are millennials, but Gen Z consumers are requiring retailers to have a more sustainable approach to the way that they sell and do business. And so for us, we really see this as table stakes. Having a sustainability program where you're not landfilling or incinerating your product, that's going to be key as we continue to have more generations that are growing up in a potentially less consumption-based model. But with the retailers that we're focused on, they want to do the right thing and they want to save money. And so that makes it an easy sell for them. But we really do see the tables turning in terms of, in Europe, there's the EPR bills. And it's possible that even as early as this year, we're going to see SEC regulations here in the US that kind of do shine a light on this, what the New York Times and what BBC Earth and what other folks have called the dark side of retail. And a lot of people don't know that this is what's happening with products. And as soon as they do find out, they're disgusted or ashamed or alarmed, and it's not going to be able to go on forever. And so we feel that we'll soon have the tailwinds from that as well. But in the meantime, there are a lot of retailers who want to get ahead of this for, whatever reason, whether it's because they want to help the environment, that's great. If it's because they're looking for a way to save money as their e-commerce platforms grow, that's fine too. We're in it for either reason.
So we've had many different guests, and I think there's a general agreement that EU and much of Europe is really leading the way when it comes to sustainability. And part of the way that they're leading it is through carrots and sticks, meaning that like the regulation and policies that you're referring to, we're starting to see more of it. But there's also a stick component where it actually costs them if they don't do it. So they need to actually have a plan in place, and they need to show that they're progressing towards that plan, or they can actually get penalized. We're not quite there yet in terms of the US. So why not go to market in Europe, Scandinavian countries first?
We have a huge returns problem in the United States.
We do.
And excuse me, it's a huge problem here. And so this is where I live. This is where a lot of the problems are being generated from. And if we can solve the problem here in the United States, where we're much more intimately familiar with the challenges, then as we continue to grow and scale internationally, we'll be able to do a better job of getting to market faster there as well. So we like to say at Postmates, we moved food. It was the most difficult thing you could choose to move. And then when we started Liquid Donate, our first customers were furniture retailers. And we were like, well, we move food and furniture. Those are the two most difficult things you could possibly try to move. And we were able to do those. So we really feel like we could open up and really do anything. And so we're kind of taking on the US market in the same way, where it's one of the most difficult markets to crack into, has the potential biggest return. And it'll also give us a lot of learnings for when we go international.
Well, definitely rooting for you guys. You guys are doing the right thing, and your responses are spot on. I couldn't agree with you more. So I've been joined by Petit, CEO of Liquid Donate. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.